4 centuries ago, humanity thrived in wealth and success. However, their hearts were tainted by lies and animosity, which led them to forge a catastrophic weapon known as the darkness. Its purpose was to put an end to all conflicts. But the darkness, having witnessed the true nature of mankind, chose to eradicate them instead, aiming to free the world from human corruption. As humanity faced near extinction, a towering beam of light split the skies, revealing a humanoid dragon wielding a mighty sword. These two beings recognized each other as fated adversaries, destined to clash until one prevailed. Their fierce battle shook the earth, sinking entire continents and leaving a trail of unimaginable devastation. Ultimately, the dragon emerged victorious, and the tale faded into legend, its truth lost in the mists of time. 400 years later, a kingdom found itself besieged by a wicked sorcerer and his monstrous army. The kingdom's soldiers fought bravely to protect their princess. Among them were Yoko, the daughter of the high priest, and Lukai, a shy young man. In the past, Yoko's father had taught her a powerful spell that could summon the spirit of the legendary black sorcerer into Lukai's body. However, the spell could only be activated by a kiss from a virgin, which is why her father forbade her from marrying. Lukai's perceived weakness made him the target of ridicule among the other soldiers. But due to Yoko's status, they tolerated his presence. Yoko hoped Lukai would become stronger, but he struggled with every effort. In the midst of the battle, the princess approached Yoko, urging her to unleash the black sorcerer's power. Yet Yoko hesitated, fearing the kiss required to break the seal. Suddenly, the sorcerer and his monstrous minions breached the defenses. 3 high-ranking officials revealed themselves as traitors, choosing to save themselves rather than remain loyal. Their betrayal was swiftly punished, as they were crushed by towering monsters. As the chaos unfolded, 2 massive creatures rampaged through the army, and Lukai was hurt while shielding Yoko. With no other option, Yoko cast aside her reluctance and kissed Lukai, successfully breaking the seal. Lukai awakened, now housing a second personality, the ancient sorcerer Schneider. Angry at being sealed in a child's body by Yoko's father, Schneider unleashed his rage, obliterating the 2 giant monsters with a single attack. Despite his rebirth, Schneider still identified as Lukai, Yoko's friend. News of Lukai becoming the vessel of the dreaded sorcerer Schneider spread quickly through the kingdom. Schneider was notorious for instigating the Golem War 15 years prior. Back then, he had been defeated by 5 great heroes, but not before using forbidden magic to ensure his reincarnation. The kingdom's people begged for Schneider's aid, but he was indifferent. He owed Yoko, not them. Despite his new strength and arrogance, he couldn't disobey Yoko. She demanded that he help those in need, and he grudgingly agreed. The sorcerer, a devoted follower of Schneider, refused to believe that the man before him was the real Schneider and dismissed him as an imposter. Commanding his forces to attack, he watched in shock as they were wiped out with a mere gesture from Schneider. Infuriated, the sorcerer unleashed a powerful lightning strike upon Schneider, leaving him seemingly burned and motionless. Undeterred, the sorcerer approached and struck Schneider's head repeatedly. However, the charred exterior cracked and fell away, revealing that the attack had merely scratched Schneider's face. Enraged, Schneider summoned the flames of the underworld upon the sorcerer. The sorcerer begged for mercy, but it was too late. The spell was cast, and he was reduced to ashes. The princess expressed her gratitude to Schneider, but he ignored her, turning instead to Yoko. He asked her a simple question before vanishing. Yoko pursued Schneider, desperate to learn his next move. Schneider then revealed his plans. First, he would seek revenge on her father for sealing him away. Next, he would wage war to conquer the world, destroying anyone who opposed him, sparing only Yoko as he had promised. Despite knowing Schneider's demonic nature, Yoko found herself developing feelings for him. Sensing her turmoil, Schneider leaned in and kissed her. In that instant, his demeanor softened, and Schneider reverted back to Lukai. Yoko began to suspect that her kiss might be the only way to seal Schneider back into Lukai's body. Meanwhile, the sorcerer's followers received grim news. Their master had been slain by high-level fire magic, a feat only one person could achieve. They sent a spy to uncover the identity of the one who defeated their leader. That night, Yoko was haunted by dreams of Schneider breaking free, murdering her father, and leading an army of monsters to conquer the world. She woke with a start, only to find Lukai had snuck into her bed, quietly cuddling her. Unbeknownst to them, a monstrous Hydra was moving toward the kingdom. The next morning, during breakfast, Yoko spotted a strange dark cloud looming on the horizon. Her father arrived, explaining that he was needed at the castle and warned that, in the worst-case scenario, they might need to awaken him again. At the palace, a messenger delivered troubling news. A neighboring kingdom had fallen to a swarm of sorcerers and beasts, now heading toward their own borders. As tensions rose, The high priest arrived with Yoko. The princess thanked Lukai for his earlier help, but Yoko, knowing that Lukai had no memory of his time as Schneider, advised against pushing the issue. The high priest suspected the enemy was preparing to revive the ancient darkness. Suddenly, soldiers rushed in, announcing that a Hydra was attacking the city. These creatures typically roamed the wilds, so its presence in human lands meant someone was controlling it. Panic swept through the palace. The officials, whose magic focused on healing and support, lacked the power to combat such a beast. Everyone turned to Yoko, urging her to bring Schneider back. Despite her embarrassment at the thought of kissing Lukai in front of everyone, the chaos and her father's insistence left her no choice. With reluctance, she asked Lukai to close his eyes, leaned in, and kissed him, awakening Schneider. As Schneider regained consciousness, the officials bombarded him with orders, assuming he would obey. But Schneider, arrogant as ever, dismissed their commands. His only goal was to conquer the world. Ori summoned a wall of fire to push the officials back and guided the king and princess to safety, claiming his debt to Yoko was now settled. He then declared his intent to kill Yoko's father, one of the 5 heroes who had imprisoned him, as the first step in his conquest. However, a flicker of fear, a remnant of his bond with Yoko, kept him from fully turning against her. Schneider summoned a bolt of lightning, aiming it at the high priest. In response, the old man raised a holy barrier, blocking Schneider's attack. However, this barrier also sealed away the priest's own magic abilities. Unfazed, the high priest used a different strategy. Cutting his own palm, he used his blood to activate a hidden seal, releasing a golem buried deep under the palace. The massive golem burst through the ground, tearing apart the palace walls as the high priest directed it toward Schneider. Seeing his magic was ineffective against the golem, the high priest braced for the worst. At that moment, the Hydra, commanded by the mysterious sorcerer, stormed into the palace, seeking to eliminate the one who had slain its master. The sight of his own summon being used against him infuriated Schneider. Enraged, Schneider called the sorcerer square-faced catfish, provoking him. The sorcerer ordered the Hydra to attack, but the golem intercepted and dealt with the beast. Desperate, the sorcerer lunged at Schneider, only to be struck down and incinerated by a fire spell. Schneider turned his attention back to the high priest, ready to continue their fight, but Yoko intervened. She admitted she was wrong to see Schneider as Lukai, and declared she no longer had feelings for him. Schneider then revealed that Lukai and he were 2 sides of the same soul. If Lukai were to die, so would he. Whoever Lukai loved, Schneider would love as well. Yoko doubted his words, so Schneider leaned in and kissed her, proving his point before reverting to Lukai. So meanwhile, one of the 4 enemy leaders sensed the magic used in the battle, realizing it was Schneider's. 15 years ago, Schneider had led their conquests, but now it appeared he was fighting to defend the kingdom. They needed to confirm whether Schneider had truly turned against them. The first of their group, the ninja master Gar, was assigned to investigate and eliminate the threat if necessary. As the high priest and ministers discussed the ominous black clouds spreading over the horizon, they realized their situation was becoming increasingly dire. Their enemy had a sword sorcerer named Kaisu, known to be Schneider's closest ally, whose strength was nearly equal to Schneider's. Kaisu had just investigated what they had extracted from beneath the seal at their recently conquered site, the Head of Darkness. Soon they planned to press forward, aiming to capture other regions. Once they overran the last 2 kingdoms, the entire seal would break, allowing them to resurrect the darkness. Back in the palace, the ministers debated whether to awaken Schneider again, alarmed by the growing danger. Yoko, however, opposed this idea, arguing that both she and Lukai were not tools to be used at their convenience. Acknowledging that they had pushed her too hard, the ministers conceded that summoning Schneider carried too many risks. With that, Yoko took Lukai back home. As she sat deep in thought, Lukai busied himself with the laundry. Suddenly, Yoko overheard Lukai being picked on again and rushed out to defend him. She found it hard to believe that someone as gentle as Lukai could share a soul with such a ruthless being. That night, the 2 went to bed, unaware of the looming danger. In the shadows of the palace, Gar and his ninjas infiltrated Yoko's home, silently taking down the guards. Gar barged into her room, intending to use her as a hostage. He demanded information about Schneider, but Yoko refused to reveal anything. Frustrated, Gar tied her up, threatening to hurt her unless she talked. Just as Gar was about to make good on his threats, Lukai woke up. Yoko tried to reassure him, urging him to go back to sleep, but he had already seen too much. When he saw Gar lifting Yoko's skirt, Schneider took over, demanding Gar release his woman. So Schneider explained to Gar that the 2 forced awakenings had weakened the seal, giving him the power to take control while Lukai slept. Gar, stunned to find Schneider residing within a child, seized Yoko as a hostage. Noticing the high priest's approach, Gar summoned a dragon and fled with Yoko, planning to use her to force the High Priest into surrendering Schneider. Back at his base, Gar imprisoned Yoko, while Liu Kai was returned to the palace. In the palace, the High Priest, unable to find another magic-wielding maiden, faced a dilemma. The princess, however, volunteered herself as the key to summon Schneider. The king, however, refused, stating that the royal kiss symbolized marriage. The princess wouldn't allow her father to cling to outdated traditions. She was determined to fight the darkness just like Yoko. Despite the king's protests, he was escorted to his chambers to avoid further conflict. Acknowledging the dangers of summoning Schneider again, the High Priest decided to take a gamble, hoping Liu Kai's personality might sway Schneider's actions. Schneider was awakened once more, feeling a sting of disappointment that it wasn't Yoko who brought him back. The High Priest pleaded for Schneider to rescue his daughter, but Schneider, still bitter towards the priest and resistant to Yoko's influence, dismissed his request. He believed that if he conquered the world, he could have anything he wanted. Grabbing the princess, he boldly declared that he could claim her whenever he desired. Unfazed, the princess responded with a sharp slap across his face. Undeterred, Schneider, with the princess and the soldiers in tow, marched toward Gar's hideout. Meanwhile, Gar interrogated Yoko, trying to learn the method to summon Schneider. Seeing her reluctance, he deduced that she had developed feelings for Schneider and decided to use this revelation against her. As Schneider's group advanced, they found themselves in an open field, causing the soldiers to doubt Schneider's sense of direction. However, their suspicions were quickly shattered as ninjas sprang from all directions, surrounding them. So the princess, eager to help, drew her sword but quickly found herself hindering the soldiers rather than aiding them. Schneider dispatched the ninjas with ease and ordered the princess to discard her sword and armor to move more freely. Begrudgingly, she complied, earning resentment from the soldiers, who directed their threats at Schneider. Back in the hideout, Gar, irritated by Yoko's silence, unleashed a slime creature to torment her. At that moment, Schneider reached the gate of the hideout and decided to make a grand entrance. The booming sound of his arrival caught Gar's attention. Recognizing the magical aura, Gar, curious to test their strength, allowed them to proceed. As they advanced, they encountered a towering minotaur blocking their path. It charged toward them, forcing Schneider to shield the princess from its onslaught. But she slapped him again for daring to touch her. Spotting a staircase full stark a beast, Schneider in the strain, a quick retreat. He urged the soldiers to stay behind, reminding them of their duty to guard the princess. Persuaded by his words, the soldiers stayed back. The princess, refusing to be left behind, attempted to follow. But Schneider quickly grabbed her and continued ascending the stairs. As they climbed, they encountered a fierce demon eye protected by an impenetrable barrier. Meanwhile, Yoko, stripped of her clothes by the slime, was forced by Gar to watch the showdown between him and Schneider, eager to see who would come out on top. Schneider hesitated for a moment, struggling to figure out how to bypass the demon eye's barrier. The princess, noticing that his concern for Yoko was disrupting his focus, came up with a plan. She snuck behind the demon eye, diverting its attention and weakening the barrier just enough for Schneider to land the final blow. Relieved that she had helped, the princess noticed Schneider's annoyance, which barely masked his embarrassment. Furious, he picked her up and continued their bickering as they moved through another corridor. Schneider confessed he was exhausted from overusing his magic, explaining how much it strained him mentally. He was saving his strength for the inevitable clash with Gar. Suddenly, the princess spotted a shiny sword and picked it up, unaware of its cursed nature. Onmei. Carelessly swinging the blade, she accidentally nicked Schneider, infecting him with its poison. So overcome with guilt and eager to help, she asked what she could do. Suck out the poison, Schneider commanded. Meanwhile, Gar revealed his true intentions to Yoko. They planned to control the demon god, using its power to wipe out the current world and remake it in their image. He found it odd that Schneider had yet to show up. Driven by remorse, the princess began extracting the poison from Schneider's wound. As she did, the demon within the sword awakened, furious that its rest had been disturbed. Gar noted that while Schneider was a powerful mage, he specialized in fire and wind magic. The fire demon, immune to all flames, rendered Schneider's fire magic ineffective. Forced into a defensive stance, Schneider shielded himself from the demon's relentless barrage of fire attacks. Unaffected by Schneider's counterattacks, the demon unleashed an explosion that shook the hideout, causing lava to seep through the cracks. Knowing he couldn't stay hidden forever, Schneider decided to face the demon head-on, telling the princess to stay put. Stepping out from behind his shield, Schneider met the demon's flames with his own, amplified by the demon's power. The resulting blast hurled the demon through the ceiling and into the chamber where Gar was waiting. The demon, stunned, lamented its first defeat in 300 years. With a hint of smugness, Schneider commented on the demon's youth, boasting about his own 400 years of existence. As the demon transformed back into its sword form, Schneider reunited with Yoko. Gar, observing Schneider's willingness to risk himself for a woman he hadn't even claimed, mocked his change in behavior. Schneider, however, was furious not because Yoko had been stripped, but because Gar had seen her like that before him. Amused by Schneider's jealousy, Gar prepared for their battle, predicting a swift victory. He knew that in a fight between a mage and a swordsman, whoever landed the first blow would have the upper hand. As the fight began, Schneider was caught off guard by Gar's unexpected long-range attack. Gar pressed his advantage, closing in on Schneider. Schneider parried the incoming strikes and created some distance to cast a fire spell. Charging through the flames, Gar severed Schneider's hand. Despite the injury, Schneider unleashed a powerful spell that sliced off one of Gar's hands in retaliation. Gar narrowly dodged the full impact, knowing that a direct hit would be fatal. Both fighters, driven by rage and determination, braced themselves for the final clash. Gar, aiming to shatter Schneider's resolve, taunted him with false claims about his exploits with Yoko. Yoko fiercely denied the accusations, but Schneider, indifferent to the truth, only cared about defeating Gar. As Schneider began chanting a spell, Gar countered with his own long-range attack. Schneider deflected it, causing both spells to collide in a massive explosion that tore through the hideout, reducing it to rubble. From the debris, Gar and Schneider emerged, their severed arms magically reattached by Schneider's power. Gar, noticing a change in Schneider's demeanor, went off to find the dragon hatchling. The princess returned the creature to Gar, acknowledging that Schneider's protective barrier had saved both the girls and the dragon. Accepting defeat, Gar admitted he was surprised by Schneider's potential for change despite his past cruelty. Schneider was then on the receiving end of a stern lecture from Yoko, which made Gar laugh. It was amusing to see the once feared Schneider getting scolded by a girl. Meanwhile, the princess, feeling like an imposter, was found by her soldiers. Gar then revealed troubling news: another army had attacked their kingdom while they were away. Suddenly, the dragon spoke to Schneider, expressing its belief that he hadn't forgotten it after 15 years. Elsewhere, Kaisu was busy planning their next move when he received reports about Gar's fortress falling and rumors of Gar's betrayal. Suspecting that Gar had been tricked into following Schneider, Kaisu dispatched one of the 4 heavenly kings, Ni, to deal with Schneider, fearing he was threatening their plans. Ni, who also led the army attacking the palace, received a request for negotiations, but the high priest anticipated the challenge ahead, knowing their opponent was a heavenly king. Ni, however, refused to entertain any deals and ordered the envoy's execution. Shortly afterward, a message from Keishu arrived, commanding Ni to eliminate Schneider. Shocked, Ni returned to camp to rest and prepare for what was ahead. Later, Schneider encountered Ni in an illusion. He remarked how little she had changed over the years since he saved the Dark Elf when her war-torn clan had scattered. Seeing himself as a father figure, he reminded her of his past kindness. Enraged, Ni demanded he stop manipulating her emotions. She had once loved him, only to discover his hidden harem. Schneider dismissed her anger, saying it was merely a man's desire. Unmoved, Ni shattered the illusion with a bolt of lightning and ordered her forces to locate Schneider, while she focused on commanding the army. The dragon, observing Schneider's failed attempt to reconcile with Ni, wondered aloud why it followed him instead of Gar. It turned out Schneider had secretly slipped away, and the dragon had merely followed his lead. Still irritated by the dragon's company, Schneider threatened to rip it apart if it reverted to its form from 15 years ago. Suddenly, they spotted a young girl being chased by a giant spider. Schneider, wanting to play the hero, rushed to her aid. The dragon found it odd to see such a large spider in this area, but Schneider was more focused on impressing the girl. After finishing off the spider with one swift move, he noticed a talisman drop from its body, suggesting it had been summoned. Curious about the girl, who had an innocent and sweet appearance, Schneider's interest grew. She led him back to her home to express her gratitude. He quickly guessed that she might be a noble's daughter. Sensing Schneider's less than noble thoughts, the dragon tried to intervene, only to get swatted away. That evening, after dinner, Schneider went to his room. The dragon couldn't shake off the odd feeling that this place was untouched by the ongoing war. Schneider, not in the mood for small talk, silenced the dragon. Moments later, the girl entered his room, offering herself to Schneider as a way of showing her thanks. Never one to turn down such an offer, he was quick to accept. Sensing a trap, the dragon warned Schneider but got a pillow thrown at it for the interruption. As Schneider removed his shirt, he noticed bruises on the girl's shoulders, marks left by armor. Before he could react, she slapped a talisman on him, ensnaring him in a web spun by a giant spider. She revealed herself as Ari, a loyal subordinate of Ni. With his magic sealed, Schneider found himself at the mercy of the spider. However, to Ari's shock, she realized Schneider was sitting behind her. He had used an illusion to blur the lines between reality and trick her. Whispering sweet words, he preyed on her emotions. Having known only cruelty, except from her master, Eri quickly fell for Schneider's manipulative charm. The dragon, observing the situation, demanded a change of scene, declaring that this wasn't some kind of romantic drama. The next morning, Schneider decided it was time to move on. Ari informed him that Nee still hadn't forgiven him, and that another assassin awaited ahead. She feared for his life, but he reassured her they would meet again. As he left, Schneider felt a pang of regret for not being more forward with Ari the previous night, wishing he had bitten her ear harder. Meanwhile, Nee, upon learning that Eri had let Schneider go, realized the situation had taken a turn for the worse. Another person had fallen for Schneider's charm. Yet Schneider couldn't care less whether someone was friend or foe. Any girl who crossed paths with him would be instantly captivated. To Nee, Schneider was the most dangerous man for any woman. Not long after, Schneider crossed paths with the assassin Ari had warned him about Kayan. Schneider, noticing Kayan's masculine appearance, turned to the dragon and asked who looked more handsome, him or Kayan. The dragon couldn't decide, so Schneider kicked it aside. Without delay, the monstrous creature Kayan had brought charged at Schneider, who swiftly destroyed it with a single move. Kayan then approached him, demanding to know where Ari was, not believing she would betray them. With a smug grin, Schneider replied that Ari had fallen for him, and that they had already spent the night together. Furious, Kayan attacked, slicing through the air, but Schneider dodged using an illusion, countering with an explosive strike. Kayan managed to avoid the blow with an illusion of their own, forcing Schneider to draw the demon fire sword from earlier to block the next attack. In the clash, Schneider's counter shattered Kayan's armor, revealing that she was actually a woman. Unfazed, Kayan, confident in her power as second only to Nee, launched an attack that began to petrify Schneider. Irritated, Schneider thought that if he were to be turned into stone, he should at least strike a stylish pose. Realizing this was an ancient spell, he figured that breaking it would require identifying which deity had cast it. Knowing which god had originated the spell would allow him to call upon a divine ally to counter it, but with countless gods to choose from, it would take more time than he had. Kayan, determined not to let him stay intact in stone, prepared to shatter the statue to ensure that no one could come along and revive him. Just as she was about to strike, Ari summoned her spiders to intercept, fully dedicating herself to Schneider's protection. Believing Schneider was more powerful than the 4 heavenly kings combined, she vowed to stand by him, even if it meant opposing her former master. Kayan, furious, fought off Ari's spiders and resolved to kill both of them. In the heat of battle, she inadvertently mentioned the name of her deity, giving Schneider the crucial information needed to break the petrification spell. Schneider, feeling smug about his appearance, disgusted Kayan, who resumed her assault. However, Schneider then revealed that the deity she served was actually subordinate to the gods he was aligned with, rendering her spell ineffective. He fired an arrow that caused Kayan's clothing to be blown off. Tauntingly, he mentioned he was going easy on her because she was a woman. In response, Kayan summoned a Kaza, a beast she controlled through a crystal. The monster could emit a gas that caused petrification, and since the gas wasn't magical in nature, Schneider had to avoid breathing it in. He tried to pull Ari in the opposite direction of the wind to evade the gas, but whenever the beast wasn't releasing the gas, it would stomp its feet aggressively. Before long, Schneider's arm began to turn to stone. In a desperate move to protect Schneider, Ari stepped into the path of the gas, redirecting it back toward Kayan. In her haste, Kayan dropped the crystal, causing the monster to lose control. With his confidence returning, Schneider quickly handled the now uncontrolled creature. With a single explosive spell, he brought the beast down. Surprised, he turned to Kayan, expecting her to be grateful. Instead, she asked him to end her life, warning that he would regret it if he didn't. Schneider, however, simply told her she could try to take his life whenever she wished. Then, showing an unexpected act of kindness, he helped her by absorbing the toxic gas from her system. Afterwards, he asked Ari to look after Kayan while he continued his journey. Kayan warned him about Nee's final subordinate account skilled in immortality techniques and said to be the strongest of them all. Schneider nodded, thanked her for the information, and set off on his way. As he left, Kayan began to understand Ari's growing feelings for Schneider. After traveling for a while, Schneider realized that he had expended too much of his magic, allowing the seal on Lukai to strengthen. Slowly, he transformed back into Lukai, leaving the dragon uncertain about what to do next. Meanwhile, back at the palace, the princess had returned, and the high priest informed her that Yoko had gone with the soldiers to search for Schneider. They had been overwhelmed by a horde of monsters, but Gar and his 2,000 ninja troops had arrived just in time to assist in their defense. As Lukai and the dragon wandered, searching for Yoko, Lukai happened to stumble upon her bathing in a lake. Yoko let out a joyful shout, prompting the soldiers to rush over and check on the situation. This time, however, she really screamed in alarm and hurriedly chased them away. It seemed kids had their own set of privileges. The soldiers were stunned to learn that the young boy before them was actually the infamous dark sorcerer, Schneider. They then turned their attention to the dragon, and Yoko suddenly remembered its name, Lars. The soldiers were even more shocked, because Lars was the name of the princess's brother, who had been granted the title of Dragon Knight, and was one of the 5 heroes who defeated Schneider years ago. Since he had vanished after the battle, no one knew if Lars was alive or dead. They began to suspect that this dragon might be the reincarnation of Prince Lars. Meanwhile, the count that Kayan had mentioned earlier had received word that 2 of Ni's subordinates had been defeated by Schneider. Determined to be well prepared, he was confident that Schneider would not be able to defeat his immortal body. To further enhance his powers, he required the blood of virgins. Among the captured girls brought to him by his vile underlings, one had already been defiled. Enraged, he drained his subordinate's blood as punishment. At the same time, a werewolf prowled the area, hunting young women. Yoko, who was putting Lukai to sleep, sensed a powerful demonic presence and immediately alerted the soldiers to prepare for battle. When they confronted the werewolf, it easily knocked them aside with a single swipe. Eyeing Yoko hungrily, it moved to devour her just as Schneider woke up. Sneering, Schneider insulted the creature, calling it a mere dog. Enraged, the werewolf lunged at him, but Schneider barely felt a thing. He retaliated with a powerful punch, pinning the beast to the ground. With a flick of his wrist, Schneider unleashed his ultimate magic, Hellfire, severely burning the werewolf. Terrified and in agony, the creature called out to the Count for help. Schneider, now realizing that only a vampire could command a werewolf, began to wonder why an immortal vampire would serve under Ni. He suspected that the Count was gathering the blood of virgins to increase his own power, possibly aiming to overthrow both Ni and Kaisu. Demanding answers, he promised to spare the werewolf's life if it confessed. But just as the creature began to confirm Schneider's suspicions, it was brutally silenced, its head crushed under a heavy boot. Yoko then confronted Schneider about leaving and turning back into Lukai. She also demanded to know the names of the 2 girls he had mentioned earlier, threatening to deny him sleep until he answered. Slightly intimidated, Schneider asked for more time. Meanwhile, the Count, who had been observing from the shadows, realized that Schneider was not fully revived and was still sealed within the boy's body. He recalled how Schneider had once rebelled against the 4 kingdoms with his disciples and grew stronger with every reincarnation. At his peak, Schneider would be unbeatable, but in his current state, the Count believed he could take him down. Descending with his forces, the Count managed to trap Schneider once again. Noticing that Lukai had awakened, he quickly ordered his men to seize both Lukai and Yoko and transport them to his castle. Gloating, the Count reveled in how easily he had captured the legendary sorcerer and gained 3 virgin girls as a bonus. Aside from Yoko, the other 2 captives were Ari and Kayan, who had also been brought in. Both Ari and Kayan despised the Count, just as they had in the past. However, they had intentionally allowed themselves to be captured to confront him directly. They quickly freed themselves from their restraints. Enraged by his subordinates' incompetence, the Count drained their blood in fury. Confident in his belief that consuming the magic-infused blood of both girls would grant him immense power, he prepared to face them. Ari and Kayan, using their talismans and sword skills, launched a combined attack on him. But even after taking the full force of their assault, his regenerative abilities proved too strong. Kayan then drew out a crucifix and garlic in an attempt to weaken him. Feigning fear, the Count tricked her, catching her off guard, and seized her. He began draining blood from Kayan's hand, convinced that it would make him more powerful than both Ni and Kaisu. Seeing this, Ari stepped in, placing her faith in Schneider to stop the Count's evil intentions. The Count scoffed at Ari's words, mocking her hope. He pointed out that their only chance of survival was locked away in the chamber above. With a smirk, he revealed the truth about Schneider's seal to the girls. Lars finally pieced it together, realizing that the High Priestess had implanted Lukai's personality into Schneider's reincarnated body. For the past 15 years, Lukai's persona had been dominant, keeping Schneider at bay except when Lukai was asleep. The Count taunted them, saying that once he took care of Schneider, their threat would be over, and he would become the most powerful of all. So up above, Lukai began to stir, his power building up. Meanwhile, Gar led the soldiers in battle against the swarming monsters, launching a giant dart to clear a path through the enemy. He couldn't help but wonder what Schneider was up to at that moment. Below, Schneider was struggling to wrest control from Lukai after witnessing the Count's mistreatment of the girls. Yet Lukai's grip was too strong. Seeing Schneider's continued entrapment, the Count sighed in relief and advanced toward Eri to drain her blood. But before he could reach her, Yoko kicked him square in the face, enraging him. He turned to lash out at her. But this became the breaking point for Schneider. Enraged by the threat to Yoko, he finally shattered the hold and broke free from his prison. Schneider stepped forward, his eyes blazing with fury. He vowed that the Count would pay for laying a hand on his Yoko and unleashed a fierce attack combining lightning and ice magic. However, when the magical assault cleared, the Count stood unharmed, believing himself superior.